You know, they say money can't buy love, but it sure can reveal who truly loves you. My story isn't one of rags to riches or overcoming impossible odds. It's about discovering that the family I thought I had was nothing more than an illusion built on dollar signs. But here's the thing. I survived the heartbreak, and I came out stronger, wealthier, and surrounded by people who actually care about me. My name is Margaret, though everyone calls me Maggie. And at 73 years old, I've learned that sometimes the most painful lessons are the ones that set you free. This story begins about 5 years ago, when I was 68, and still believed that blood was thicker than water. How naive I was. I had worked my entire life building a successful accounting firm from the ground up. My late husband Robert and I never had children of our own. Not by choice, but life had other plans. Instead, we poured our love and energy into my sister's children, particularly her youngest daughter, Sarah. Sarah was the light of my life, the daughter I never had. I watched her take her first steps, helped her with homework, paid for her college education, and was there for every milestone that mattered. When Robert passed away 12 years ago, Sarah was one of the few people who truly supported me through my grief. She would visit every week, bringing flowers and stories about her job as a nurse. We would sit in my garden, drinking tea and talking about everything and nothing. I felt like she genuinely cared about me as a person, not just as her wealthy aunt. Over the years, I had been incredibly generous with my family. When Sarah's older brother Michael needed money for his down payment on a house, I wrote him a check for $50,000 without hesitation. When their middle sister Jennifer went through a messy divorce, I covered her legal fees and helped her get back on her feet. When my sister Helen needed expensive medical treatments that insurance wouldn't cover, I made sure she got the best care money could buy. I wasn't showing off or trying to buy their love. I genuinely wanted to help my family succeed and be happy. Having built a multi-million-dollar business and having no children of my own, what was the point of hoarding money? I planned to leave everything to them anyway, so why not help them while I was still alive to see them benefit from it? Sarah had been dating this man, David, for about 3 years. He seemed nice enough, polite, hardworking, and clearly devoted to Sarah. When she told me they were getting engaged, I was overjoyed. I immediately offered to help with the wedding expenses. After all, I had been setting aside money for years, hoping to one day pay for Sarah's wedding. I had nearly $200,000 specifically earmarked for this occasion. "Oh, Aunt Maggie, you're so generous," Sarah had said, tears in her eyes. "But we want to do this ourselves. It's important to us to pay our own way." I respected that sentiment, though I made it clear that if they changed their minds, the offer would always stand. As the months went by, I watched Sarah stress about wedding costs. She and David were both nurses, making decent money but nothing extravagant. They wanted a beautiful wedding but were clearly struggling with the budget. Every time I saw her, she looked more worn down by the financial pressure. "Sweetie, please let me help," I would say. "This is what family's for." But Sarah would always politely decline, insisting they wanted to handle it themselves. I admired her independence, even as I worried about the stress it was causing her. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday in June, and I had already bought a beautiful dress, an elegant navy blue ensemble that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I had my hair appointment scheduled, had arranged for a car service, and was genuinely excited to see my beloved niece marry the man she loved. 3 weeks before the wedding, Sarah called me. I remember the exact date because it was circled on my calendar as "Call florist about wedding flowers." I had secretly arranged to upgrade their floral arrangements as a surprise gift. "Hi, Aunt Maggie." Her voice sounded strained, almost guilty. "Hello, darling. I was just thinking about you. I can't wait for the wedding. I've been counting down the days." There was a long pause. "Actually, that's what I'm calling about." My heart started to race. Was the wedding canceled? Had something happened to David? "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Another pause. "Well, you know how tight money has been for the wedding planning." "Of course, and I've told you repeatedly that I'm here to help with whatever you need." "I know, and we appreciate that so much. But the thing is, we've had to make some really difficult decisions about the guest list. I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. What kind of decisions? We've had to cut the guest list way down. The venue charges per person, and the catering costs are they're astronomical. We simply can't afford to invite everyone we originally planned to invite. Sarah, honey, I've offered multiple times to help with these costs. You know money isn't an issue for me. I know, Aunt Maggie, but we really want to do this ourselves. We want to start our marriage being financially responsible. I was getting frustrated but tried to keep my voice calm. Okay. So what does this mean exactly? The words that came next felt like a physical blow to my chest. We're so sorry, but we're not going to be able to invite you to the ceremony. We're keeping it really small. Just immediate family and a few close friends. Maybe about 30 people total. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, unable to process what I was hearing. I'm sorry. What did you just say? We're not able to invite you to the wedding, but we'd love to have you over for dinner the following week to celebrate with us then. The silence stretched between us as I tried to wrap my mind around this. I wasn't immediate family? I, who had helped raise her, who had paid for her education, who had been there for every important moment of her life. I wasn't immediate family. Sarah, I need to understand this clearly. You're telling me that you can't afford to have me at your wedding? It's not personal, Aunt Maggie. We're cutting a lot of people. But I've offered to pay for the additional costs multiple times. We really want to do this ourselves. I felt something cold and hard settling in my chest. And who exactly is considered immediate family? Well, my parents, Michael and Jennifer and their families, David's parents and his siblings. I quickly did the math in my head. Sarah, that's already more than 30 people just with immediate family. Well, some of David's friends are basically family to him. And there it was. David's friends, people Sarah had known for 3 years, were more family than the woman who had helped raise her for 28 years. I see, I said quietly. Please don't be upset, Aunt Maggie. We'll have a lovely dinner the week after, and you can see all the photos and... I cut her off. Sarah, let me ask you something. In all the years you've known me, have I ever been anything but generous and loving toward you and your family? Of course not. You've been wonderful. And in all those years, have I ever made you feel like my love or support came with strings attached? No, never. Then help me understand why you would think that asking me to help with wedding costs would compromise your financial independence, when you know that I want nothing more than to see you happy. She was quiet for a moment. It's complicated, Aunt Maggie. No, Sarah. It's really not complicated at all. You don't want me at your wedding. Just say that. That's not true. Then explain to me how someone who considers me family can justify excluding me from the most important day of their life over money that I've repeatedly offered to provide. The conversation went in circles for another 10 minutes, with Sarah insisting it was purely about money, and me trying to understand how someone could be so financially stressed about a wedding, while simultaneously refusing help from someone who loved them. Finally, I told her I needed to go and hung up. I sat in my kitchen for hours that night, staring at the wedding invitation that was still magneted to my refrigerator. The beautiful cream-colored cardstock with elegant gold lettering suddenly looked like a mockery. Margaret Henderson was written in Sarah's careful handwriting on the envelope. The same handwriting I'd helped her practice when she was learning cursive in 3rd grade. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just hurt. Angry. Because this wasn't really about money. And we both knew it. This was about Sarah and David wanting a trendy, Instagram-perfect wedding with their cool young friends. And having their elderly aunt there didn't fit the aesthetic they were going for. If it had truly been about money, she would have accepted my help. If it had truly been about keeping it small and intimate, she wouldn't have invited David's college buddies who she barely knew. This was about image, and I was being deemed bad for their image. I called my lawyer the next morning. James, I need to make some changes to my will. James Patterson had been my attorney for over 20 years. He had handled Robert's estate, managed my business transactions, and knew me well enough to hear the steel in my voice. What kind of changes, Maggie? I want to remove Sarah, Michael, and Jennifer as beneficiaries. There was a pause. That's a significant change. Can I ask what's prompted this? I explained the wedding situation. James listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of surprise or disapproval. Maggie, I have to ask. Are you sure you want to make permanent changes based on what might be a temporary hurt? Family situations can be complicated, and sometimes people make poor decisions they later regret. James, I've been thinking about this all night. This isn't about one phone call or one hurt feeling. This is about finally seeing clearly. For years, I thought I was helping family who loved me. Now I realize I was just a bank account with a pulse. But what if Sarah realizes her mistake and reaches out to make amends? Then we'll see if her apology comes before or after she learns about the will changes. James was quiet for a moment. Okay, but I'm going to recommend something. Instead of removing them entirely right now, why don't we redistribute your assets to reflect your actual relationships? You can always change it again later, if circumstances change. What do you mean? Well, you volunteer at that literacy center, right? And you've mentioned how much you enjoy working with the kids there. What if we allocated a significant portion of your estate to organizations you actually care about, and a smaller portion to family members who have shown they value their relationship with you? I thought about this. It felt right. Keep talking. Your housekeeper, Maria. You've mentioned how she's like family to you. Your neighbor Bob, who checks on you and helps with your garden. The nurse who took such good care of Robert in his final months. People who have shown you genuine care and affection, not because of what you can do for them, but because of who you are. By the end of that week, my will looked very different. The bulk of my estate, about $4.2 million, was now going to be split between several charities. The Children's Literacy Center, where I volunteered, a scholarship fund for nursing students from low-income families, and a fund for elderly people who couldn't afford proper medical care. Maria, who had been cleaning my house and brightening my days for 15 years, was getting enough money to buy her own home and send her grandchildren to college. Bob, my neighbor who had become a true friend, was getting enough to ensure a comfortable retirement. Sarah, Michael, and Jennifer were each getting $10,000. Enough to show I hadn't forgotten them, but a far cry from the equal three-way split of my entire estate they had been expecting. I didn't tell anyone about these changes. I went about my life as normal. But something fundamental had shifted inside me. I started paying attention to how people treated me when they wanted something, versus how they treated me when I had nothing to offer them. The patterns were eye-opening. Michael, who used to call maybe once a month, hadn't called since I'd given him the down payment money 2 years earlier. Jennifer, who had been so grateful for my help during her divorce, had barely spoken to me since her life had stabilized. Even my sister Helen, whose medical bills I had covered, seemed to only reach out when she needed something. But Maria always asked about my day and genuinely listened to the answer. Bob always invited me to join him and his wife for dinner when he noticed I seemed lonely. The kids at the literacy center lit up when they saw me. Not because of what I could give them, but because I made learning fun. The wedding came and went. I saw the photos on social media. Sarah had looked beautiful. The venue was lovely. And yes, it was clearly an expensive affair despite all the talk about budget constraints. I counted approximately 80 people in the group photos. So much for the tiny 30-person wedding. Sarah posted a picture of herself and David cutting the cake, with a caption about how perfect their day had been and how grateful they were for all the love and support from their family and friends. I wasn't mentioned in any of the thank you posts, which was fine by me. It confirmed that I had made the right decision. About 2 weeks after the wedding, Sarah called. "Hi, Aunt Maggie. I'm so sorry I haven't called sooner. The honeymoon and getting back to work have been crazy." "Hello, Sarah. How was the wedding?" "Oh, it was absolutely perfect. I wish you could have been there, but I know you understand." I said nothing. "Anyway, I was calling because David and I would love to have you over for dinner this weekend to show you all the photos and tell you about everything." "That's kind of you, but I'm busy this weekend." "Oh, okay. How about next weekend?" "I'm busy then too." There was a pause. "Aunt Maggie, are you upset with me?" Such a simple question, but it deserved an honest answer. "Sarah, I'm not upset. I'm disappointed, but more than that, I'm enlightened." "What do you mean?" I mean, I finally understand where I stand in your life, and I'm adjusting my expectations accordingly. You're being dramatic. It was just one day. No, Sarah, it wasn't just one day. It was a choice. You chose to exclude me from the most important day of your life while including people you barely know. And you chose to do this, despite my repeated offers, to help with any financial concerns. That tells me everything I need to know about how you view our relationship. But we're family. Family doesn't treat family the way you treated me. The conversation ended awkwardly, with Sarah insisting I was overreacting, and me explaining that I was simply reacting appropriately. She said she would call again soon, but she didn't. Months passed. I threw myself into my volunteer work and spent more time with the people who had proven themselves to be genuine friends. I started traveling more, taking trips I'd been putting off for years. I visited Ireland, took a cruise through the Mediterranean, and spent 2 weeks in New Zealand. It was liberating to spend my money on experiences that brought me joy, rather than constantly worrying about helping family members who saw me as an ATM. Christmas came, and I received a card from Sarah with a generic message about hoping I was well. Michael sent a text. Jennifer sent nothing. My sister Helen called on Christmas morning, but the conversation felt obligatory rather than warm. Maria, on the other hand, invited me to her family's Christmas celebration. Bob and his wife included me in their Christmas Eve dinner. The children at the literacy center had made me handmade cards that were more precious to me than any expensive gift. It was around this time that I started to feel genuinely happy again. Not just content or resigned, but actually happy. I realized that I'd been carrying the emotional burden of one-sided relationships for years, and letting go of that burden was incredibly freeing. In February, I got a call from my sister Helen. It was unusual because she typically only called when she needed something, and she had just received her usual generous birthday check from me a few months earlier. Maggie, I need to talk to you about something serious. What's wrong? It's about Sarah. She's been asking me some questions about your finances, and I think you should know about it. My blood pressure spiked. What kind of questions? She wanted to know if you had ever mentioned changing your will. She said she was worried about you because you seemed different lately, and she was concerned that someone might be taking advantage of you. I laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Taking advantage of me? That's what she said. She mentioned that you've been traveling a lot and spending money on trips, and she was worried that maybe someone was influencing your financial decisions. Helen, let me ask you something. In the past year, how many times have you called me just to see how I was doing? Not because you needed something. There was a long silence. Well, life gets busy, you know. Right. And how many times has Sarah called just to chat? Not because she wanted something? Another silence. Here's what's really happening, Helen. Sarah is starting to realize that her actions have consequences, and she's worried about how those consequences might affect her inheritance. She's not concerned about my well-being. She's concerned about her bank account. Maggie, that's a terrible thing to say about your own niece. Is it? Helen, when was the last time Sarah invited me to anything? When was the last time any of your children included me in their lives unless they needed money? Helen couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth. After I hung up, I called James. I want to accelerate some of the charitable donations in my will. I'd like to make some significant gifts while I'm still alive to see the impact. What kind of gifts? I want to establish the Robert Henderson Memorial Scholarship for nursing students. I want to donate enough to fund at least 10 full scholarships per year. That's a substantial commitment, Maggie. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Over the next few months, I began implementing what I privately called my Living Legacy Plan. I established the scholarship fund with a donation of $1.2 million. I donated $500,000 to the Literacy Center to build a new wing. I gave Maria a bonus of $50,000 that she cried over for 10 minutes straight. These donations brought me more joy than any family dinner or obligation gift ever had. I got to see the first scholarship recipients. 10 young people from low-income families who would now become nurses without drowning in debt. I got to watch the groundbreaking for the new Literacy Center wing. I got to see Maria's face when she realized she could finally afford to move her family into a safer neighborhood. Meanwhile, my family's true nature continued to reveal itself. Michael called in April because he wanted to refinance his mortgage and was hoping I could co-sign for a better rate. Jennifer called in May because her ex-husband had stopped paying child support and she was struggling financially. Sarah tellingly didn't call at all. I helped Jennifer because her situation was genuinely difficult and involved my great-nephews, whom I adored. But I told Michael that I thought it was time for him to handle his own financial responsibilities. But, Aunt Maggie, you've always been so generous with the family. Michael, I've been generous with people who treat me like family. There's a difference. He was clearly confused by this response, which told me everything I needed to know. It had never occurred to him that his relationship with me should involve anything other than financial transactions. Summer came around again, and with it, Sarah and David's first wedding anniversary. Sarah posted beautiful photos from their anniversary trip to Italy, a trip that clearly cost significantly more than my presence at their wedding would have. She also posted a long sentimental message about how blessed she felt to have such a loving family, and how grateful she was for all the support they had received as they started their married life. The post had dozens of comments from family and friends, but I noticed she hadn't tagged me in it despite tagging practically everyone else in the family. 3 days after the anniversary post, Sarah called me. "Hi, Aunt Maggie. I know it's been a while since we talked, but I was hoping we could get together soon. What's the occasion?" "No special occasion. I just miss you, and I feel like we haven't been as close lately." This was interesting. Sarah had never been one for sentimental phone calls, so something had clearly prompted this sudden desire for connection. "How was your anniversary trip?" "Oh, it was wonderful. Italy was absolutely beautiful. We had such an amazing time. It looked expensive." There was a pause. "Well, we saved up for it. It was a special occasion." "I'm sure it was. Anyway, I was thinking maybe you could come over for dinner this weekend. I'll make your favorite lasagna." I almost laughed. Sarah had never made lasagna in her life. That was her mother's specialty, and Helen had made it for me countless times when we were younger. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course. What's my favorite flower?" Roses? What's my middle name?" Elizabeth?" "When is my birthday?" A long pause. "September something?" "My favorite flower's peonies. My middle name is Rose, and my birthday is October 15th. You've only known me for your entire life." "Aunt Maggie, Sarah, here's what I think is happening. I think someone has mentioned to you that I've been making some large charitable donations lately, and you're worried about what that means for your inheritance. Am I right?" The silence on the other end of the line was answer enough. "I thought so. Sarah, let me save you some time and stress. Yes, I've made changes to my will. Yes, I've been donating significant amounts to charity. And yes, this is directly related to how I've been treated by my family over the past year. Aunt Maggie, please don't make any rash decisions." "Rash?" "Sarah, I've had over a year to think about this. Nothing about my decisions has been rash. But we're family." "No, we're related. There's a difference. Family shows up for each other. Family includes each other in important moments. Family treats each other with love and respect, not just when they need something." I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. "I made a mistake with the wedding. I know that now, but please don't punish me forever for one mistake. Sarah, it wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern of behavior that became impossible to ignore. The wedding was just the moment I finally saw clearly. What can I do to fix this?" It was a fair question, and I thought about it carefully before answering. "Sarah, if you had called me the day after your wedding and said, 'Aunt Maggie, I made a terrible mistake. I let financial stress and poor judgment cause me to exclude someone I love from the most important day of my life, and I'm horrified by what I did,' then we might have been able to work through this. I'm saying that now. No, you're saying it now because you're worried about money. You're not sorry you hurt me. You're sorry it might cost you financially." She was quiet for a moment. "How do you know that?" "Because, Sarah, If you were truly sorry for hurting me, you would have reached out months ago to repair our relationship. Not just now when you're worried about your inheritance. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Sarah alternating between apologies, explanations, and barely concealed anger about the money. She kept coming back to the inheritance, which only proved my point. Finally, I told her the truth. Sarah, you're going to inherit $10,000 from me. That's what I've decided is appropriate given our relationship. The gasp on the other end of the line was audible. 10,000? But I thought... there are 3 of us kids, so... So you thought you'd get about $1.4 million? Well, yes. That money is going to people and organizations that have treated me with genuine love and respect. It's going to help kids learn to read, help young people become nurses, and help elderly people get the medical care they need. But I'm your niece, and you'll always be my niece. But being related to someone doesn't entitle you to their life savings, especially when you've made it clear that the relationship only matters to you when it's financially beneficial. Sarah was crying harder now. Please, Aunt Maggie, please reconsider. I'll do anything to make this right. Sarah, if you want a relationship with me, a real relationship, then we can work on that. But it won't change my will. My financial decisions are based on years of observation about who truly cares about me as a person. That's not fair. What's not fair is spending decades being generous with people who see you as a bank account. What's not fair is being excluded from important family events by the very people you've supported throughout their lives. What's not fair is realizing that your family's love is conditional on your continued financial contributions. After we hung up, I sat in my garden for hours, thinking. I felt sad, but I also felt free. The conversation had confirmed everything I'd suspected about Sarah's motivations. Over the following weeks, I received calls from Michael and Jennifer. Both conversations followed a similar pattern. Initial expressions of concern about my changed behavior, followed by attempts to understand what had prompted my charitable giving. And finally, barely disguised panic about their inheritance prospects. Helen called too, this time with a different approach. She wanted to invite me to Sunday dinner, just like old times. When I asked why the sudden invitation, she admitted that the kids were worried about me and thought it would be good for us all to spend more time together. Helen, where were these invitations for the past 2 years? Well, you know how busy everyone gets. Right. And suddenly everyone has time for Sunday dinner, just as they're learning about my charitable donations. I declined the invitation. But I didn't decline all invitations. Maria's daughter was getting married, and she asked if I would like to attend. It was a beautiful, small ceremony in her backyard, with homemade food and genuine joy. Nobody asked me for money or treated me like an ATM. They were simply happy to have me there as part of their celebration. The contrast was stark and heartbreaking. A few months later, I received an unexpected call from David, Sarah's husband. Mrs. Henderson, I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly. Not at all, David. How are you? I'm well, thank you. Mrs. Henderson, I wanted to apologize to you. This was surprising. Apologize for what? For the wedding? For not inviting you? Sarah has told me about your conversation, and I've had time to think about what we did, and I'm ashamed of myself. I was quiet, waiting for him to continue. The truth is, Mrs. Henderson, it wasn't really about money. We could have found a way to include you if we'd wanted to. The real reason is that we got caught up in trying to have this perfect, trendy wedding, and we made a lot of decisions based on what we thought would look good, rather than what was right. This was the first genuine apology I had received from anyone in the family. I appreciate you saying that, David. Sarah is furious with me for calling you, but I couldn't live with myself knowing that we had hurt someone who has been nothing but kind and generous to our family. You didn't deserve that treatment. Thank you for acknowledging that. I know it's probably too late to fix this, but I wanted you to know that at least one person in this family recognizes that we failed you, not the other way around. After we hung up, I found myself crying for the first time since this whole situation began. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief. Someone had finally validated what I had experienced. Someone had acknowledged that I deserved better treatment. I called David back that evening. David, I want you to know that your apology means more to me than you might realize. Mrs. Henderson, you've been nothing but good to this family. We should have been protecting and honoring that relationship, not taking it for granted. I have a question for you. Do you think Sarah truly understands what she did wrong? Or is she primarily upset about the financial consequences? David was quiet for a long moment. Mrs. Henderson, I think Sarah is genuinely sorry for hurting you. But I also think she's struggling to separate that from the money issues. She's angry and scared about the inheritance changes, and that's making it hard for her to focus on the relationship repair. I appreciate your honesty. Can I ask you something, Mrs. Henderson? Of course. Is there any way to rebuild this relationship? Not for the inheritance. I understand that decision is made, but just for the family connection. It was a good question, and I thought about it carefully. David, I would be open to rebuilding a relationship with both of you, but it would have to be on different terms than before. I can't go back to being the family ATM who gets excluded from important events, but included when money's needed. What would you need from us? Consistency. If we're going to have a relationship, it needs to be because you value my company, not because you value my bank account. That means regular contact, inclusion in family events, and treating me like family, not like a resource to be managed. That makes perfect sense. And David, it means accepting that my will isn't changing back. The money is going where it can do the most good, to people and organizations that have shown me genuine care and appreciation. I understand. And for what it's worth, I think what you're doing with the scholarships and the literacy center is wonderful. That's the kind of legacy that really matters. This conversation gave me hope that maybe, eventually, I could have some kind of relationship with Sarah and David. But it would be a very different relationship than before, built on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. Meanwhile, my new life continued to flourish. The scholarship recipients from the first year were excelling in their nursing programs. The literacy center had broken ground on the new wing. Maria had moved her family into a beautiful house in a safe neighborhood and sent me photos of her grandchildren playing in their new backyard. I also started dating again, something I hadn't done since Robert died. I met a lovely man named Frank at a volunteer event. He was a retired teacher, had been widowed for several years, and was also involved in various charitable activities. We discovered we had a lot in common beyond our shared loss. Frank was completely unaware of my financial situation when we started spending time together, which was refreshing. He would insist on paying for our modest dinners out, and he seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions rather than my net worth. When I eventually told him about my wealth, mainly because I wanted to be honest about why I was able to travel so much, his reaction was perfect. "Well, that explains the nice car," he said with a smile. "But it doesn't change anything about why I enjoy spending time with you." It was exactly the right response. As my first anniversary of the will changes approached, I reflected on how much my life had improved. I was happier, healthier, and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. I had stopped carrying the emotional burden of one-sided relationships, and I had started investing my time and energy in connections that were mutually rewarding. Sarah called me on the anniversary date, though I don't think she realized the significance of the timing. "Aunt Maggie, I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation, and I want to try again to explain how I feel. I'm listening. I know I hurt you with the wedding situation, and I know my reaction to the inheritance changes made things worse. I've been angry and scared, and I took that out on you instead of taking responsibility for my own actions." This sounded more promising than her previous attempts at communication. "Go on." "David helped me understand that the money isn't really the point. The point is that I treated someone I love badly, and then I compounded that by making it all about money when you tried to hold me accountable. That's a fair assessment. I want to ask if we can start over. Not about the money, I understand that's decided, but about our relationship. I miss you, and I want to earn back your trust and affection. Sarah, what would starting over look like to you? Regular phone calls that aren't about needing something. Including you in family events because we want you there, not because we feel obligated. Treating you like the important person you are in my life, not just when it's convenient. And you understand that this won't change my financial decisions? Yes, I understand that. And I accept it. I want a relationship with you because you're my aunt and I love you. Not because of what you might leave me in your will. It was the conversation I had been hoping to have for over a year. Sarah, I would like that too. But I need you to understand that rebuilding trust takes time. This isn't something that gets fixed with one conversation. I understand. I'm willing to put in the work. And surprisingly, she did put in the work. Sarah started calling me every Sunday just to chat. She invited me to small family dinners. She asked about my volunteer work and actually listened to my answers. She included me in her social media posts and treated me like a valued family member rather than an obligation. It wasn't the same relationship we had before. Too much had happened for that. But it was a healthier relationship built on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. David kept his word too. They both made an effort to include me in their lives in meaningful ways. When Sarah got a promotion at work, I was one of the first people she called to share the news. When David's father had surgery, they asked if I would like to visit him in the hospital because they knew I would want to be there for them during a difficult time. Michael and Jennifer, unfortunately, never made similar efforts. Their contact with me remained sporadic and usually coincided with financial stress in their lives. When Michael called to complain about his property taxes, or when Jennifer called to discuss her concerns about her son's college tuition costs, it was clear that they still saw me primarily as a potential solution to their financial problems, rather than as a family member worthy of a genuine relationship. I remained polite but distant with them. I would listen to their concerns, offer emotional support when appropriate, but I no longer offered financial solutions. This seemed to frustrate them, and their calls became even less frequent. My sister Helen fell somewhere in between. She made more effort than Michael and Jennifer, but less than Sarah. She would invite me to family gatherings, but it often felt obligatory rather than enthusiastic. She seemed to struggle with understanding why I had made such drastic changes, and our conversations sometimes carried an undercurrent of tension about the money situation. But I had made peace with all of this. Not every relationship can be saved, and not every family member is capable of the kind of self-reflection and growth that Sarah had shown. I had learned to accept people where they were, while protecting my own emotional well-being. 2 years after the wedding incident, I received some unexpected news. Sarah was pregnant. She called me with genuine excitement, not because she wanted anything from me, but because she wanted to share her joy with someone she loved. It was exactly the kind of call I'd always hoped to receive from her. "Aunt Maggie, we're having a baby." "Oh, Sarah, that's wonderful news. How are you feeling?" "Tired and nauseous, but so happy. We've been trying for a while and we were starting to worry it might not happen. I'm so excited for you both. When are you due?" "Early March. We just had our first ultrasound, and everything looks perfect." I found myself tearing up with happiness. This was the Sarah I remembered from before all the drama. Excited, loving, and wanting to share her life with me. "Have you told your parents yet?" "You're actually the first person I've called. I wanted you to be one of the first to know." That meant more to me than she could possibly realize. Over the following months, Sarah kept me involved in her pregnancy journey. She sent me ultrasound photos, asked for advice about baby preparations, and included me in her excitement about becoming a mother. When she had a scary moment with some bleeding in her second trimester, I was one of the people she called for emotional support. I found myself getting genuinely excited about becoming a great aunt. I started looking at baby clothes when I was out shopping, and I began planning what kind of college fund I might want to establish for this new little person. But I was also careful. I had learned my lesson about assuming relationships were stronger than they actually were. I participated in Sarah's pregnancy with joy, but I also maintained the boundaries I had established. When Sarah and David announced they were having a baby shower, they made a point of asking me if I would like to help plan it. Not to pay for it, to actually help plan it. They wanted my input on decorations, my suggestions for the menu, and my help with organizing games and activities. It was exactly the kind of inclusion I'd always wanted from my family. The baby shower was lovely. I contributed financially, but because I wanted to. Not because anyone expected it. Sarah made sure I felt honored and included throughout the entire event. When people asked about the beautiful decorations, she made sure to credit my ideas. When someone complimented the delicious food, she mentioned that I had suggested the caterer. It felt like being part of a family again. Little Emma Rose was born on March 8th, healthy and beautiful. Sarah had asked if she could use Rose as the middle name to honor me, which touched me deeply. When I met my great-niece for the first time, holding her tiny form in my arms, I felt a surge of love and protectiveness that reminded me why family relationships are worth fighting for when they're genuine. But I also recognized that this new chapter didn't erase the lessons I'd learned. I loved Emma immediately and completely, but I would be careful to build a relationship with her based on mutual affection rather than financial dependency. As Emma grew from infant to toddler, I enjoyed being her great aunt in all the best ways. I babysat when Sarah and David needed date nights. I attended her first birthday party, her first Christmas, her first steps. I read her stories and taught her to play patty cake. I was present and engaged in her life because I wanted to be, and because her parents welcomed my involvement. But I also maintained my new priorities. I continued my volunteer work at the Literacy Center, where I'd become something of a fixture. The children there knew me as Miss Maggie, and I looked forward to my time with them every week. I continued traveling with Frank, exploring new places and creating new memories. I maintained my friendships with Maria, Bob, and the other people who had proven themselves to be genuinely caring. My charitable giving also continued. The scholarship fund was now supporting 15 nursing students per year, and I had started receiving letters from graduates who were working in hospitals and clinics across the country. The Literacy Center had completed their new wing, and I had been honored at a dedication ceremony for my contributions. I had also started a new project, a fund to help elderly people afford prescription medications they couldn't otherwise purchase. These activities brought me deep satisfaction. Every scholarship recipient, every child who learned to read, every elderly person who could afford their heart medication. These were concrete ways my money was making a difference in the world. Meanwhile, my relationship with Sarah continued to grow stronger. She would often call just to chat, sharing stories about Emma's latest antics, or asking for advice about motherhood. David and I had developed our own friendship, bonding over our shared love of gardening and our mutual adoration of Emma. When Emma turned 2, Sarah and David decided to have a small family party. As we were planning it, Sarah said something that showed me how much she had grown. "Aunt Maggie, I want you to know that having Emma has made me understand even more how badly I messed up with the wedding. The idea of excluding someone who loves her from an important moment in her life. It's unthinkable to me now. Sarah, we've moved past that. I know we have. But I need you to know that I understand now, in a way I didn't before, what family really means. It's not about genetics or obligations. It's about the people who show up for you, who love you unconditionally, and who want to share in your joys and sorrows. That's exactly right. And you've always been that person for me, even when I didn't appreciate it or reciprocate it properly. It was a moment of real understanding between us, and it made me feel hopeful about our continued relationship. Emma's second birthday party was a joyful affair. She was at that delightful age where everything was exciting and new, and her enthusiasm was infectious. Watching her blow out her candles, with considerable help, I felt grateful for the journey that had brought me to this moment. Michael and Jennifer were also at the party, and I noticed they seemed somewhat uncomfortable around me. They were polite but distant, and I could sense they still harbored resentment about the inheritance changes. But I had made my peace with their attitudes. Not everyone is capable of the kind of self-reflection and growth that genuine relationships require. After the party, as I was helping Sarah clean up, she asked me a surprising question. "Aunt Maggie, do you ever regret the changes you made to your will?" I thought about it carefully before answering. "No, Sarah, I don't. Do you think I should?" "No, not at all. Actually, I think what you did was exactly right. You're supporting causes you care about and people who have shown they genuinely care about you. That's what money should be used for, even though it means less for you and your siblings, especially because of that. The fact that you're willing to use your resources to help people who need it, rather than just passing it along to relatives who already have comfortable lives, that's admirable. Her response showed me just how much she'd matured over the past few years. Sarah, can I tell you something? When I made those changes to my will, I was angry and hurt. But now, several years later, I can see that it was actually one of the best decisions I ever made. Why? Because it forced everyone to examine their relationships with me. The people who truly cared about me found ways to show that care that had nothing to do with money. The people who were primarily interested in my financial resources revealed themselves too. It was painful, but it was also clarifying. And now you know who your real family is. Exactly. And Sarah, you are definitely part of my real family. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how much my life had changed since that devastating phone call about the wedding 3 years earlier. I had lost some relationships, but I had strengthened others. I had discovered the joy of philanthropy and the satisfaction of making a real difference in the world. I had found love again with Frank. I had become a great aunt to the most wonderful little girl. Most importantly, I had learned to value myself enough to demand genuine relationships, rather than settling for transactional ones. 6 months later, I received a phone call that brought this lesson full circle. It was from a young woman named Jessica, one of the first recipients of the Robert Henderson Memorial Scholarship. Mrs. Henderson, I'm calling because I wanted you to know that I just graduated from nursing school, and I got a job at Children's Hospital. Jessica, that's wonderful. Congratulations. Mrs. Henderson, I need you to know that without your scholarship, none of this would have been possible. My family couldn't have afforded to send me to nursing school, and I would probably be working in a factory somewhere instead of starting my dream career. Jessica, you earned this through your own hard work and dedication. The scholarship just made it financially possible. I know, but I wanted you to know that your generosity has changed my entire life. I'm going to be able to help sick children get better, and I'm going to be able to support my own family in ways my parents never could. After we hung up, I sat in my living room and cried happy tears. This was what real impact looked like. This was what it meant to use your resources to make a difference in the world. That evening, Frank came over for dinner, as had become our weekly tradition. As we sat in my garden afterward, watching the sunset, he asked me if I was feeling all right. You seem especially reflective today. I told him about Jessica's call, and about how it had made me think about the journey I'd been on over the past few years. Maggie, can I tell you something I've observed about you? Of course. When I first met you, you seemed like someone who was carrying a heavy burden. You were generous and kind, but there was a sadness about you that seemed to run pretty deep. I nodded. That was probably accurate, but over the time I've known you, I've watched that burden lift. You seem lighter now, happier, more at peace with yourself and your place in the world. I think that's true. What do you think made the difference? I thought about his question seriously. I think I finally learned the difference between being generous and being used. I learned that real love isn't conditional on what you can provide for someone, and that it's okay to expect the people in your life to show up for you the same way you show up for them. And that knowledge set you free? In a way, yes. It allowed me to invest my time, energy, and resources in relationships and causes that truly mattered to me, rather than constantly trying to earn love through financial generosity. Frank smiled. You know what I love most about you, Maggie? What? You figured out how to be generous without being a doormat. That's a rare and valuable skill. As I prepared for bed that night, I looked at the photos on my dresser. There was one of Robert and me on our wedding day. One of Emma taking her first steps. One of me with the kids from the literacy center. One of the first scholarship recipients at their graduation ceremony. Each photo represented love. Real, genuine, mutual love. Not love based on what I could provide, but love based on who I was as a person. I thought about Sarah's wedding, which had started this entire journey. At the time, being excluded had felt like the end of the world. Now I could see it had actually been a beginning. The beginning of learning to value myself appropriately and demand genuine relationships. Would I change anything about how things unfolded? The pain I went through was real and difficult, The realization that some family relationships were more transactional than I had wanted to believe was heartbreaking. But the growth that came from that pain, the clarity that came from that realization, and the authentic relationships that emerged from the ashes of the false ones, those things were invaluable. I had learned that it's better to be alone than to be surrounded by people who only value you for what you can give them. I had learned that real family isn't about genetics. It's about mutual care, respect, and affection. I had learned that the most satisfying way to use wealth is to help people who genuinely need it, rather than to enable people who simply want it. Most importantly, I had learned that I deserved better than I had been accepting, and that it was never too late to start demanding the respect and care that any person deserves in their relationships. Now, at 73 years old, I was surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, not what I had. I was making a real difference in the world through my charitable work. I had a romantic relationship built on mutual affection and shared values. I had a great niece who brought me immense joy, and a renewed relationship with her mother that was healthier and more authentic than our previous dynamic. My story didn't end with the inheritance changes. It began with them. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to stop accepting less than you deserve and start building the life you actually want. The money I had saved throughout my life was now serving its highest purpose. Not as a tool to buy affection or maintain dysfunctional relationships, but as a way to create positive change in the world and support the people who had proven themselves worthy of support. And as for my family members who never made the effort to repair our relationships, I wished them well. But I no longer carried the burden of their choices. Everyone gets to decide what kind of person they want to be and what kind of relationships they want to have. I had finally learned that I couldn't control their choices, but I could absolutely control my own responses to those choices. The invitation to Sarah's wedding had been addressed to Margaret Henderson, but the woman who received that invitation was someone who didn't yet understand her own worth. The woman I had become since then. She would never have accepted being treated that way in the first place. And that, perhaps, was the most valuable inheritance of all. The knowledge that I deserved better, and the courage to insist on it.